Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Guy L. Freer and Bob Price. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on their show, they help authors create books that transform our lives and imaginations. Through radio excellence, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael and Bob maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and writing solutions. They serve listeners by providing outlets for their creative skills and energies, and they help them flourish in the competitive marketplace. Their weekly show provides intros, writing spotlights, helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob.
And I'm back. And I know you're all just so excited to hear me back. I'm excited to be back. Everybody's excited to hear me back. Thank you, Mark. And my husband's here with me. And yes, everybody's so happy to hear me back. Welcome to Author's Edge, where we engage in lively conversations with both emerging and seasoned writers, as well as publishers, songwriters, illustrators, and artists to explore the art of storytelling. Today, we're thrilled to be chatting with JJ Renek. Welcome, Jana, JJ. Jana, JJ, which one would you prefer?
JJ's great.
JJ's
Thank
great.
you. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine. Doing well.
Doing well. Was the ride good?
Oh, yes. Beautiful day.
Isn't the weather great?
Sailing. Yes.
Before we dive in, let me
Okay.
share a little bit about JJ's background. JJ Renek is the pen name and alter ego of retired physician Dr. Jana Trumbold. Pivoting from a major in English literature, she pursued a career in obstetric nursing and holds both a BSN and an MSN in that field. A decade and 2 children later, she returned to medical school and obtained her MD from the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School in Dallas. Since returning to writing, JJ has penned several medical suspense novels and a collection of short stories across various genres. When not writing, she enjoys reading, traveling, and keeping an eye on current events. Gardening, putting up pickles, which I want to know about because I love pickles, a variation on her grandmother's recipe, and conspiring with her 4 grandchildren for any spare time. She now makes her home with her husband, minus any wild pets, which I want to know about, in the Show Me State, where she writes full-time or pretends to. Welcome to Author's Edge, JJ.
Thank you.
And I like that. Sounds like you want to write, but you only pretend with 7 novels. Is that pretending?
No, that was a smart aleck remark. We all say we write full time, but many times we write sporadically and take care of business with the rest of our time.
Right. Well, I don't write. I like to talk about books, and I like to talk to authors and writers and all of that. I spent 39 years teaching English and editing students' papers, and that was well enough for me. So, did you grow up in Springfield or Southwest Missouri?
No, I was born in Iowa. And when I was around 5, my parents moved to Wichita, Kansas. So I grew up in South Central Kansas through high school. And
so you're really an import like me.
Apparently, yes. We ended up in Southwest Missouri in Springfield approximately 9, almost 10 years ago.
Okay. What brought you here?
My husband's career.
And he is in
pulmonary medicine.
So you're both doctors.
Correct. We're a medical family.
Medical family. That's like I'm a teaching family. So you started your college career in English literature, though, and then went into medicine.
I settled on English literature along about my sophomore, junior year. And then a summer job came along that was
I want to hear about
enticing.
that.
Oh, it was not a big deal. I was an X-ray escort. And that sounds more interesting than it is.
An X-ray escort.
I would go and I worked the evening shift, and I would go and fetch people for X-rays, pre-op X-rays and such as that. This was back some decades ago when people came into the hospital before their procedure and had their workup pre-op. And I would go and get them and bring them down, and take them back. And I did other little tasks, worked the dark room back when we had to put x-rays through developer and so forth. That was fun. But that pivoted my interest into medicine and nursing. And I ended up applying to the nursing program at University of Kansas and entered that. So that added on a year of college because it was a 5-year program.
Isn't that amazing how one little thing
Right.
can pivot a whole career thing? That happened to me I was going to be a police officer and then I turned into a teacher. And it was just one little thing that pivoted everything, and you just change careers instantly.
That's right.
And you love it.
Right.
It's like, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just a pivot.
Right.
So you went from English literature to medicine
to nursing.
And then your specialty, then from there you went to?
When we were in Utah, because of one of his career opportunities as fellowship in pulmonary, I went to graduate school and got my master's in perinatal nursing, high-risk pregnancy and so forth. And so then after that, we moved to Texas. And again, his career opportunity. And I didn't work in nursing at that point. We'd started our family. So had 2 little kids at home and was deciding to go back to work in nursing. And one thing led to another, and I decided to fulfill a prior dream of going into medicine. And so I pursued that.
So why did you go from nursing to doctor?
I wanted to go into obstetrics and gynecology, and I thought that would be
and so ultimately, where'd you end up?
In internal medicine.
Wow. How'd that happen?
Well, Parkland Hospital's very, very busy in obstetrics. And I had been out in Salt Lake City, and that's very, very busy in obstetrics. And I just sort of changed my tune. Internal medicine and the surgery rotations there at Parkland at UT Southwestern were so interesting and vigorous. And internal medicine was quite a challenge there. It was just challenging and interesting, detective work and that type of thing.
So explain exactly what internal okay, I'm keeping in mind that the most technical thing I've ever done was do Shakespeare. Okay, so what is internal medicine?
It's adult medicine. Typically, internists see patients from age 18 or 21, usually 18 forward all the way through adulthood. We don't deal with pediatrics, don't do obstetrics, though we do office gynecology in outpatient internal medicine practice often. So it's adult medicine, basically.
So that's what that means.
And all the subspecialties.
Okay.
If you want to go into cardiology or pulmonary or gastroenterology, you take an internal medicine residency first, and then you apply for fellowship and go off into the subspecialty arenas. So
so that's what internal medicine is adult medicine.
Right. Diagnostics and treatment.
I did not know that.
Short of surgery. The subspecialists do procedures such as, cardiac caths and cardiology and bronchoscopy and so forth, and pulmonary, and of course the GI procedures everyone enjoys.
Tell me about that.
At any rate, so it can be proceduralist, but it's primarily diagnosis and treatment. So it's like across a spectrum of diseases.
It's like a GP, but it's
not really. The GPs, general practitioners of old, morphed into the specialty of family medicine that came into being some decades back. And so they're specialized family medicine doctors, and they see the pediatric patients and at least quite often, and some obstetrics and gynecology, particularly in the smaller cities and communities.
Oh, okay. All right. So I learned something I did not know today. I had no idea. Okay. So then you had a whole nice career, and then you retired.
Correct.
And you went into?
And I started writing again.
Okay.
So I had done writing in college, as we all do, and enjoyed it, and wrote my master's thesis and those kinds of research things. And then in medical school, our senior class there, I don't know if they still do it, but we annually, the senior class would write and produce a senior video that had to do with the medical school experience and so forth. And so when our turn came, it was the 15th anniversary of Saturday Night Live. And we fashioned it after Saturday Night Live. It was entitled Southwestern Night Live. And it could
That
not
must
be.
have been a heck of a good time.
It was very fun. We wrote our own commercials. We wrote all of the stuff. And so I was involved in that with a team of people. It was
Do you still have the video?
I sure do. And and it's funny to watch at times, I must say. But anyway, it was usually fashioned around an epic movie. Like that year, Batman was one of the first epic movies out the big seasonal movie.
Uh-huh.
And so was Field of Dreams. And so we couldn't decide which to approach. So we decided to fit those in as themes and
So you use
and
both of them.
little skits, but we had the overall Southwestern Night Live format.
Uh-huh.
And and we ended up having practically everyone except 2 people in our class of 190 to 200 involved, and in some
Wow.
fashion. And the faculty loved it, and more of the faculty became involved in ours than some of the previous ones at that time. I don't mind saying that was back in 1990. And so at any rate, I really
That is
enjoyed
so
that. Yeah.
fun.
So
I love that.
I'm not a stranger to writing, but I hadn't written novels, short
Mhm.
stories, fiction like that.
Right,
So
right.
yeah,
But that is so fun.
it was, and very well received.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like so much fun. So then all right, so what were some of the things that you started writing with?
Well, I unpacking books when we moved back to Wichita, I found several novels I hadn't read, and one of them was Sandra Brown's novel Exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dove into that just to read, and I decided that I'd like to try my hand at writing romantic suspense. And so my first book, which hasn't been published yet, was supposedly a romantic suspense, but it wasn't. It was more suspense, conspiracy suspense, that type of thing.
And it hasn't been published
No.
yet.
It's the first book in a series that
And-
I'm going to put out a little later in
Oh, okay.
25. So I went to a writer's meeting. I
Mhm.
decided after a couple of years of working on that, a year and a half, that I needed to go to a writer's meeting. And that's where I met my editor. I submitted a certain
Mhm.
number of pages for evaluation, and she was very kind. It was very bulky. And so we needed to work on it and trim it down to size. But she at least encouraged me that I could write, and you need to just hone your craft.
Right.
And so Laura and I started working together, and we still do. She's
Mhm.
still my editor. And that's really started it. And then I wrote The Payoff after that. That was the second one. And from
And then
there, it's
Unseen is your third one.
no, Unseen is my 7th book.
Oh,
So I
how
put it out
How
front.
come we got the
I just
disjointed?
wanted to put it out next after Payoff. So 2nd book, 7th book, and its topic is about telemedicine, which is something
Oh, a little
that
bit more timely.
correct, that is on people's minds, and patients and people are affected
Mhm.
by our use of telemedicine. And so
Yeah, it's more like the Zoom meeting type thing. Telemedicine.
well, oh yes, I see what you virtual
Right.
visits.
Virtual
right,
visits.
right. You sit behind a screen, they sit behind a screen, and
and you talk about it
correct,
as opposed to touching,
poking, right,
poking,
prodding,
prodding. Yes,
listening.
yeah, poking,
You
prodding.
do lose the physical exam in that
Yes.
setting, and that's
And-
what my protagonist, Dr. Hope Nichols, is. She has an issue with that.
Yes.
Right.
Actually, Ralph read the whole thing. He read the whole book.
Oh, okay.
I didn't get a chance to read it, but he did.
Yeah. He can jump in if he
Yes, and I told him to jump in
and
whenever.
correct me if I misspeak. Of course, she has an adversary that is pro telemedicine expansion for his own personal
Gain.
reasons and gain. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, before we get real deep
okay,
into all of this,
sure.
I also want to ask, how come you use a pen name of J.J. Renek?
I didn't think my normal legal name was a very good author's name. So
Really?
I worked for a couple of years to try to come up with a pen name. And those are my first two initials, so I can't deny that. But the last name's an anagram of my mother's maiden name. And it seemed to just have a snappy, short, sharp feeling.
Okay.
Sharp in a lot of ways, yeah.
Now, you also have a love of English literature. How did that
Uh-huh.
influence your writing?
Well, I think, when you spend a lot of time, and I really loved 18th century British literature,
Yes, I know.
major British writers, one and two, and all that. And I did study the novel in college, and we had other English courses, but I never took creative writing. I never imagined that was something I was going to do. So I think the more you read different
Yes.
styles of prose and even study it and have to write exposition about it, the more skilled reader and subsequent writer you become. I think it infiltrates. In fact, my editor has said, don't put your adverb at the end of the sentence. And I look back, and that's more of the British style. So
Mhm.
maybe I was influenced by that, and I just carried it forward subconsciously, not realizing, how that influenced me.
You are listening to JJ Renek chatting about her latest book, Seen and Unseen, on the Author's Edge, coming to you weekly on Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sunday at 7 a.m. on KWRH929.com and KXOK102.com, and Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on My Genre Radio Network. So, can you tell us where you get your ideas from? How do you generate your plots and themes?
Well, there doesn't seem to be a shortage of it. Changes that are occurring across the landscape of medicine interest me. Independent function of extenders or nurse practitioners and PAs is an issue that's being debated and discussed. The telemedicine issue, who's going to pay for health care, long-term care, and one of my books addresses the long-term acute care setting that has
What do you mean
developed
long-term?
people who are discharged from the hospital who still need fairly intensive care, such as ventilator care or other major care support. And they're not ready to go to a nursing home. Hopefully that's not in their future. And they have up to usually about 90 days to show vast improvement at the long-term acute care hospital. And there's a whole corporate world developing those. And so that's an issue and interest. My original book it is part of a series that will come out later in 25, addressed the whole issue. I wrote it during a lot of the hot debate on healthcare reform and the subsequent years as this was being implemented. So it sort of addresses that whole landscape.
Okay.
For better or for worse. And so those kinds of issues seem to keep presenting. And other domestic suspense scenarios and issues that come up. That's basically what I write about. Psychological suspense, I've sort of recategorized myself from technically not medical suspense with worldwide viruses or
Right.
bacteria gone wild or mutating, or people for their own gain using technology in an immoral or unethical way. It's not that. It's more conspiracy behind these changes in medicine. I don't know of any. I'm making them up, fabricating them. At least I think so.
Or hope so?
Yes. And then psychological suspense has more to do with an everyday person. They can be a professional, or they don't have to be, who unravels something, discovers something going on that develops a little more slowly, but pretty soon they realize there's a very serious
Problem.
issue that they've
Issue.
walked into or they've been drawn into. And so there's elements of both conspiracy and psychological suspense in my writing.
Now, are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm a planner.
You're a
A
planner.
planner. Someone referred to that as plantster.
Plantster. Meaning?
Well, you have an idea of the theme you're writing about, and you have
Right.
an idea, you've worked out enough of it to know it'll go somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
that you could develop a plot trajectory, and you can tell if there's a good ending, that, or you know the ending as you're developing this. And then I sit down and start thinking of scenes after I write chapter 1. So it's a creative process as I go. So it's not an outline that I stick to, but as it develops, I can tell what this next chapter, next scene. And so it's a scene by scene sort of planning method or outline, if you will. And that seems to work best for me, but I rearrange them and I add in and I change endings and so forth.
Do you know the ending before you get there?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
But in Seen and Unseen, I thought I did. And no, that wasn't
It was
the right ending, not at all. It would have been really boring and anticlimactic. And so I rewrote and changed that as I approached the ending.
Okay. Do you use the standard story outline? In other words, you
Like
start.
3-act?
Yeah,
Plot.
you start with the beginning and you get to a climax, and then you can do. Do you use that standard
It seems
format?
to work out that way. Mine looks more like the labor curve. I tell my husband, a longer prodrome where you're all excited. Well, anyway, where you build up slowly.
Yeah,
And then you go into transition where things start happening much
and
faster.
then you get a climax,
And then you get to the climax. And then there's a resolution at the end. Sometimes.
So so you have a major resolution or not?
Usually a partial, I
Okay.
think. I've looked back over it. Some books have more of a.
Now you said so you have a series.
I have a series of 3 books. I'm about ready to write the 4th in that series.
Okay, so do you have any cliffhangers in yours? I
Mhm.
mean, so
Mhm.
are
Not strictly speaking, there's some denouement or resolution,
denouement.
but people still would wonder, now what's going to happen after this? Or I
Mhm.
wonder what, that doctor's name is Jill Anders, and what's next in store for her. And the second book's actually more of a sequel to the first, because that first book was too long and
Mhm.
I couldn't jam all that there. So the second book's a sequel. The third book is could stand alone. A patient of hers comes to the fore and sort of takes over that book. She's still active. She's still in it. She's still the protagonist. So now I have to write a 4th one with a different, not theme, but
All right, so let me ask you this. Now, the Seen and Unseen is part of a series. It's the 7th.
no,
No,
it's a standalone.
it's a standalone.
Payoff's a standalone.
Payoff
Yeah.
is a standalone.
So I wrote 4 payoffs. I wrote 4 standalones, and then 3 books
okay.
in a series, and I'll be ready to
Okay,
write the.
So what's the name of the series?
Well,
Have you got a name?
I have a name of the book, and I'm going to probably change that. And so I wasn't really ready to reveal that at this point.
Oh, okay.
Stay tuned.
Yeah,
So stay tuned.
right. The original title I picked is rather overused in various iterations. And so I decided that might not be the best title.
Okay, then we don't need to share that.
Yeah. And so I've worked out a list of 2 or 3 others, and I just
Okay.
haven't decided which.
All right.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we are almost to a point where we need to go for a commercial break. But before we go to the commercial break,
Yes.
I would like to share, are you an author, publisher, editor, illustrator, songwriter, or artist looking to expand your reach? Advertise on Author's Edge to connect with passionate readers and industry insiders. With engaging interviews, reviews, and discussions, your book will shine. Why choose us? Reach thousands of book lovers, boost sales and visibilities, target impactful ads, and trusted host endorsements. Elevate your presence with Author's Edge. Contact us today, 573-714-1352, where authors and readers meet. And it's all yours, dear.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro Restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page.
Jana Renek, JJ Renek, I'm sorry, and we will be continuing our conversation. I have a quote here that you wanted to share with everyone. Ill persons bear a certain look, and this man undoubtedly fit that image. Dark circles framed his eyes. He blended well into the fluorescent lights, doing him no favors. Now, what does this quote mean to the storyline?
This is the first sentence in Seen and Unseen. First chapter, first sentence. When the protagonist, Dr. Hope Nichols, goes in to see this gentleman, she works in urgent care, so people can walk in. They aren't scheduled. You don't know who may come next. They may walk in because their doctor can't see them that day or work them in very soon, or they just come in off the street and don't have any particular doctor that they're seeing regularly. So this is just to set the scene. She's going in this exam room, and here's this gentleman. He has had several virtual visits before he arrives there, but no one will refill his antibiotics or cough syrup. And so he's irritated about that, and he presents just wanting that, and he'll be on his way. And he does not look well at all. And so she then goes through her assessment, and that is, you're introduced to her being uncomfortable with the concept of telemedicine being expanded. And here's an example of a gentleman who needed to be seen, examined, not just given another round of antibiotics and cough syrup. And so that starts the story. And then she goes on from there to.
So does she see a doctor? Does she?
Sees her. She diagnoses him, sends him for a CT scan. He has a lung mass. His chest x-ray is abnormal. And then she schedules CT scan. And then he eventually gets referred to specialists for continued workup and treatment.
Does he die?
You're asking me to reveal something from the book.
Oh, darn. I got to know.
After the show, ask your husband.
Oh, okay. Dang. You're tough.
She goes back to her desk, and there's an email message from administration about the upcoming medical staff meeting the next week. And it's all about telemedicine expansion. And so she has this conflict right off the bat, and then it goes on from there.
Aha. Okay, so what was the hardest scene to write emotionally?
There are several in that book that are just examples of types of cases that people see in urgent care or in the office or hospital. That was hard in that you knew he very likely would not have a good outcome. And so I hit that right up front that, people don't come in just with coughs and colds, that there are some serious, and you lose track of them when you work urgent care because you're not the one who sees it to conclusion. So she had to accept that. I had worked urgent care also during my career, and I'm an internist, and so I like to know that final answer, like to see it through with the patient. And so letting them go and often not hearing totally what has happened or hearing the outcome can be challenging. There were a couple of other, I don't want to reveal all the cases. But she meets a young woman who's a patient who does have a very treatable disorder, but it hadn't been correctly diagnosed, again, through a virtual visit. And so Hope meets her father.
Now, is there a place for virtual medicine?
There is. And it's often in follow-up of stable patients who don't have new symptoms or don't have complications. It can be used effectively. I think there's a danger in overusing it or assuming that it will somehow replace expensive doctor visits. And I think
it's like replacing it's like replacing the computer for the teacher.
Correct. Yes. And
it's exactly the same thing.
So I don't object to it. I think we just have to use it appropriately and in the appropriate settings.
How do you create suspense using everyday actions?
Well, you create the character that has the internal conflict. You bring external forces to bear on them. And so right off the bat, there's this internal and external conflict, and they meet an antagonist. They meet somebody who obstructs their agenda and their goal, or you, as the protagonist character needs to stop this person from doing something bad or not favorable. So you build the tension through these conflicts, and then you have to bring in action. You have to bring in things that seem that are fictionalized and a little occasionally exaggerated, but could happen that way. So that becomes a little disturbing to the reader, hopefully, that they think, my gosh, this seems so real. Could this happen? And I think that keeps them coming back, hopefully.
What do you want? What impact do you want to make on the reader?
I want people to be aware. I want them to
why do you write these stories?
Right. I want them to be entertained, first of all. I want them to find characters they can either identify with or they like, or they wish they were like that, or they see some redeeming quality.
Make friends.
Yeah. Even liking an antagonist.
Yes. Oh, sometimes that's even more fun.
Yeah. You love to hate this person, or you know someone like that and you think, oh my gosh. So either way, they like the characters, they get drawn into the situations these characters face. But underneath it, I mean, if there's a lesson or a theme that strikes the reader as something important to us all. After all, we're all patients at some point. Or most of us are. Or we have family members who've gone through things. Those are real situations that people have had to deal with in life. And so I don't shy away from writing about them. They're not, I hope the emphasis of the book is the character and their dilemma and how they work it out, not this underlying theme of telemedicine or different clinic structure.
That's just the avenue that you're carrying.
It's on the medical landscape. I write this psychological or conspiracy suspense spread across the medical landscape. And so that's my intention. Readers can always tell us what they like or don't like about it, or what they got out of it. And I've heard a few things in particular about payoff. So,
like what?
Well, I mean, good things that
Good.
people, oh yes, a family member works as a nursing administrator in a
Mhm.
small hospital, or this or that, um, or how the ER comes alive to them. Many people have been in an ER, some have not, and I tried to write those scenes as realistically as possible.
Have you worked in an ER?
Well, the high-level urgent care. We've all worked in ERs during our rotations in residency training,
Uh-huh.
taken rotations there, and we're always going down to ERs. When we're a hospitalist, or in previous days, the internist would go and admit people. And so we hang around, hang out in ERs.
Hang out in ERs. So what'd you do this
more
afternoon?
than you might.
Oh, I hanged out in the ER. Had nothing else to
Hung
do.
out.
Hung out. Yeah, hung out.
Hanged
out.
hung
What
out.
the heck? And I'm an English teacher. Don't listen to me. So you've also done other types of writing besides your
Mhm,
novels. And you also do medical editing.
Mhm.
Okay. Why is that important?
I thought I'd offer it up as a service for people, novelists in particular, all fiction writers, who are inserting medical scenarios or scenes or clinical conditions that their protagonists or characters might suffer, and helping them to develop those in a realistic, authentic way, helping them reduce the bulk of over-describing too many clinical scenarios. A lot of times people put too much of that in, and you have to use kind of a light hand, and I think editing would help people know. I've seen some short story entries in contests that we have an opportunity to critique and judge and so forth. And in fact, one in particular recently, the setting wasn't right for the head trauma that the woman had suffered in an assault. And she was isolated in a hospital room all by herself, and she was basically going in and out of consciousness. And the doctor there wasn't addressing that issue. And that's just not the way it happens. And she wouldn't be put in a hospital room by herself to begin with. She would have been held in the ER until there was a space in a neurotrauma unit, or if that wasn't available, a monitored unit of some, and they'd keep an eye on her for probably 24, maybe longer hours, making sure she was stable. So those kinds of things may sound like an exciting beginning to a book, but you can have lots of excitement in the ER that because this was an assault perhaps by a police officer, boyfriend, or I couldn't tell exactly with a one-page entry, but police are all over in the ER. So this could have created a tense scene there as well. So just helping people get it right without overdoing it.
How important is it to get the lingo right?
Very.
Well, because
if you're going to use the lingo, and you can find a lot.
Simplify the language. I mean, all right, I sometimes have difficulty reading my medical, like what prescription I'm taking. I go into the doctor's, I go in to pick up my medication, and she says to me, she gives me the long term. The term is about that long,
Right.
And I say, well, it starts with a T.
Right.
Okay. It's like, I don't know what it is. How do you get across in language that's easy for a layperson to understand what's going on?
Well, that's where you bring it down. You don't insult the reader, but you bring it down to use as much common language as you can. But procedures should be called what they are. You can say a gallbladder removal, or you can say a cholecystectomy. But you can also explain that to the reader as the protagonist is reviewing the medical record or talking to the patient and saying that. I had several things in Seen and Unseen that were some advanced medical conditions, but Hope Nichols was explaining it to you through the character and how she was arriving at this conclusion. vascular disease and so forth. Payoff has this, yes, I mean, this is pertinent. Payoff has a chapter where the physician's reviewing medical records, and I wrote them in italics, and I wrote them as if they were a discharge summary with abbreviations. But then Brock Stafford thinks about it, and he's thinking to himself, thank goodness this, thank goodness that didn't happen. And he explains to the reader through his own thought process what was going on with the patient.
That was
so
the other thing that
hopefully isn't off-putting.
I noticed in your book, okay, one of the things that I noticed in your book, and is that when you use, when you do go through people's thoughts, you put the thinking in italics.
If it's a direct
I found that was a different way of doing it.
It used to be more popular than it is now, but
why did you choose that?
Just to make sure the reader knows this is a direct thought of the protagonist or the point of view character at the time. I don't always do it. I write third person near, meaning what they sometimes call over the shoulder.
Right.
Where you have this companion person and they're observing what you're doing and thinking, or you're explaining your thoughts to them. I mean, that's not a very good way of explaining it, but
right.
Occasionally you see the direct thought of the character in a dialogue, even, or an interaction, or when they're observing something. And it's for emphasis, I think. You don't have a paragraph of it, though.
Right.
It gets a little...
It get cumbersome then.
Yeah. And a little too old.
Yeah. Yeah. You also have done some other short stories. You did an anthology, A Pathway to Mystery, and Good Neighbor.
Those two, yeah.
And Passage.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about those?
Well, go ahead. Yes.
No.
Passage, these were written to prompts. The Good Neighbor was written to a number of word prompts, and you had to include those articles that were found at the scene of a murder. And you had to write the story. And the Passage was a visual cue of an apparition coming down the hall of what appeared to be an old Gothic or Victorian house. And so Passage has to do with a couple who bought an old Gothic home, redid it, but they had a visitor. And this apparition sort of bothered them. And so they consulted the local librarian who knew the history of the town. And she came to see what was going on and try to help them. And it has an interesting outcome. The other one.
Okay, so what's the outcome? Come on.
No. Good Neighbor is told from the point of view of a police officer, a detective, and her assistant, the other detective. And there's been a woman in her Peachtree condominium in Atlanta who is
Peachtree condominium.
And she and her elderly friend, neighbor next door, were planning to go to the flower show. And at any rate, this individual was found, Buffy, was found dead on her expensive white carpet. And
Buffy.
And lo and behold, the investigator, Enid, had to work with the neighbor. And of course, the Good Neighbor
was the one that did it.
I guess, spoiler alert.
I knew it.
But it was,
well,
it was sort of an elaborate poisoning that wasn't real obvious at first.
Okay.
And so, she was upset because Buffy was going to take someone else to the flower show.
Well, jealousy gets it every time. Every time.
Those are fun. And we've had some others, and so you write flash fiction. This is all 750 words or less. And
flash fiction, tell me what that is.
Well, it's actually 1,500 words or less, or up to 2,000 usually. Can be a little longer. Sometimes the person running the contest or the exercise will say, write a 500-word story. And you have to be very succinct. You have to get to the point quickly, and you have to bring your whole story to fruition, or nearly so. at the end. And so I write most of mine from a suspense standpoint, but then there's this occasional paranormal
Mhm.
type of thing. I have one that's domestic suspense, and some are a little more poignant than others, but I'm writing a series of them now, or I have written, that have World War II themes and
Oh.
finding your father's history and finding out that your father had a very interesting history you didn't realize because he could not share it with anyone when he came back. And he's gone now, and you're sorting through his things. So I started writing these short stories based on the prompts that were given from the Springfield Writers Guild and
Uh-huh.
the Sleuths Inc. group I'm in. And so I realized that I could make these short stories, separate chapters in a book, and it would end up having its own plot trajectory as a whole
Uh-huh.
and resolution.
Well, that sounds
but
really interesting.
Only written about 6 of those, so I need to get busy
And finish those?
manufacture some more chapters in that. Yeah, it's
Well,
fun.
that sounds like lots of
And
fun.
you have to do some research about issues. If you put people over in Europe
right.
and they're running espionage missions, you have to be read up a little bit
Oh, yeah.
on how
Accuracy.
that worked and what was
Accuracy is
going
very
on with
important.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
So you are an indie writer.
yes.
Radio show identifier is coming up. You are listening to JJ Renek chatting about her book, Seen and Unseen, on Author's Edge, coming to you weekly on Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sunday at 7 a.m. on KWRH 929.com and KXOK 102.com. Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network. Now, we are chatting with JJ Renek about her book, Seen and Unseen, and the other one is called Payoff, which we are also talking about. And we are talking about the fact that she is an indie writer. So what made you decide to be an indie writer, not a traditional writer?
I entertained both. I educated myself and learned about the publishing industry and just decided that I was probably better suited to be an indie author and have more control on the trajectory of my business and what I wrote and when I put it out and that type of thing.
What were some of the challenges that you faced as an indie writer?
Well, primarily any writer, but particularly indie writers, have to work harder at being discovered. We suffer from anonymity.
Yes.
And so there's that. The workload of setting up your own publishing business, treating it like a business, can be real challenging, very time consuming.
Very time consuming.
If you become so engrossed in that, your writing can suffer. You can have less time. You feel less creative because you're engaged in so many left brain things, but you can approach them in a creative way. Setting up a website's creative. Setting up an email newsletter can be very creative, but it's also a task.
And it also takes away from your writing.
It does. It takes time away. So you have to be very disciplined or try to be disciplined and devote specific time to writing, not let that go by the wayside, and then contain when you do your business endeavors. And marketing is one of the major things that is
Marketing is a
difficult
bear.
for all writers, and some traditional publishers do not do as much marketing anymore as they used to for authors. So, but indie authors have it all. They have to do it all. So
Yeah.
learning that, the promotion end of the business can be very challenging.
How do you promote your book?
Well, this is a wonderful promotion. Through
Right,
the
that's
radio
true.
show. But going to writers' conferences, big or small, meeting people, networking. Yes. We just returned, as a matter of fact, from Ozark Creative Writers, held in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, every October. It's what I would call a smaller regional meeting.
Right.
Bring in good speakers, and there's craft and business discussed, and there are traditional and indie authors there. So going to meetings, associating with local writers groups, wherever you live. There's one usually close by. Springfield Writers Guild is a chapter of the Missouri Writers Guild, as is the St. Louis Writers Guild.
As is the Southeast Missouri's Writers Guild, which is what I belong to, and
Right.
Ralph belongs to.
Right. And you meet people who know people, or who together you make opportunities
Yeah, you network.
for book signings. Some independent bookstores will offer you time to set up a book table and promote.
How are your book sales going?
Well, they're better than than before I started.
I know that yeah, I know how that feels.
My attitude is the first book isn't going to set the world on fire. Second book gives
It's
you a
a
little
little
more credibility. By the time you reach about your third or fourth book, you have already created a backlist of sorts, and then moving forward, it's easier to gain attention. So I use
Yes.
an email newsletter.
How did you generate your email list?
By people who desired to. They went to my website, and I direct them to my website at any opportunity and tell
Right.
them that they can sign up right there.
Right.
And you have to coach some people through that.
Yeah, you do.
But that works. And then other people at our recent meeting would sign on an email sign up list. And so I could add them. They gave me permission to add them. They can always unsubscribe at any point. People
Right.
have that freedom. They're not stuck in there.
Yeah.
So that's a big challenge. There are courses you can take about how to expand your email newsletter. Many indie authors do that.
Any suggestions on any courses?
Right. Mark Dawson does self-publishing formula. He's out of Britain. He's a retired
Right.
lawyer. He writes suspense. He has a friend, James Blatch, who works on some of these courses. He's a retired RAF pilot, a real colorful pair there. Nick Stevenson has specific courses on how to gain your first 10,000 readers, meaning on your email newsletter. He's very humorous, and he does a good newsletter himself. So there's that. Dave Chesson with Kindlepreneur, Publishers Rocket. Jane Friedman is a publishing industry guru, and she has a hot sheet. And she tells you, and she has webinars to teach you all these things about building your website, building your email newsletter, this type of thing. So there's resources out there for all
Right.
sorts of writers, not just indie.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's part of what I like to do with the show is I like to have as many sources that people
Yeah.
can
Right.
access. And so all of that
Right.
information is wonderful to have. What advice would you give aspiring writers, especially medical field type mystery writers? What would be
Gosh.
something that you would really think is important for them to know or to keep in the back of their mind when they're writing?
Gosh, well, write what you like. Develop your theme and your plot, because it's hard to write medical suspense, I think, without being somewhat of a plotter or planner. And go lightly on the technology and the virology and bacteriology, unless that's essential to the plot and that you have to go in to a lot of detail. I mean, eyes will glaze over and they'll just read through all that technical if you're too
Yes.
heavy-handed with it, and you don't want to ever stop the reader from reading. Anyway,
No.
develop convincing, sympathetic characters, not stereotypical lab technicians and medical specialists and nursing specialists. Try to come up with an original bent, an original twist on your theme. We're told medical suspense is not it doesn't sell well now, isn't very exciting. So there's a group, there's a niche out there that would like to read it, particularly since the COVID pandemic. There may be more interest
That was what I
in
was
the
going to ask you.
pandemics. But usually you have to stay away from that for a couple of years and let all that settle down before you
Capitalize
yeah,
on it.
Yeah, usually. I think that just like any other genre, legal thrillers or whatever,
Mhm.
you have to have some unique sort of scenario that you develop,
Mm-hmm.
not just the standard.
Not just a standard. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So how can our audience get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website, jjrenek.com. It's not complicated. And I have an email at that website, jj@jjrenek.com. And then there's information on the website about my books, about my history, a little longer bio, and so forth. And they can
What's-
sign up for my email newsletter on the contact form, or they can contact me for medical editing and other questions.
Is there any other thing that you offer besides medical editing?
And my writing.
Oh, okay. No, I meant like.
No, I don't have a blog
Oh,
at this point.
yeah. No. Do you
No.
want one? Are you thinking about? No,
No, at
me
this point,
neither.
yeah.
For some reason, blogging doesn't really seem to interest me all that much.
Some people enjoy it.
I know, but
Um,
it doesn't.
I think it would feel like another assignment
Thank
for
you.
me. And you don't have to do it real often, but
Yeah.
in order to keep those lines alive, you need to be regular. And
I think a newsletter is good enough.
that's my feeling at this point. We'll see.
Yeah. So what's next for JJ Renek?
Well, I have a book, Adverse Events, that I would like to release before the holidays. We'll
Now,
see.
does that book have a title?
Adverse Events. Adverse
Adverse events. And
Yes.
can
That-
you tell us a little bit about
It's-
that?
It's a nurse educator
Uh-huh.
who teaches patients how to give themselves important medications that are injectable only. And she runs into a problem in the first scene, and that leads to potentially her undoing and her career. So anyway, that's kind of a teaser on that
Ooh.
one. And it has a nice happily
Ending?
ever after ending.
Oh, it does
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
happily ever after
yeah.
ending?
And there's a little romance involved in all of these
Ooh,
books.
That was one of the things Ralph really liked, the way you handled the romance in the books.
Okay.
He liked
Yeah.
that. He liked the way you handled
Okay.
that a lot. Okay.
So I think people enjoy that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now is this one part of a series?
No, it's the
Standalone.
standalone also.
So,
Yeah,
and when is your series going to come out?
in 25.
In 25.
Right. I have one more standalone named Proscription.
And that is about?
That is about this long-term care, acute care industry.
Okay.
And two doctors have a conflict in that. And it's they almost emerge as two co-protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
But the male protagonist, the nephrologist, a kidney specialist, takes the lead in terms of he is the protagonist, but the other doctor.
Does that one have a happily ever after?
It does, yes, it does, but it's not a
romance?
type of happily ever after.
But
It comes to resolution.
it comes to
And
resolution.
people,
Ooh,
um,
whenever it says a resolution, may not be the one that you want.
it has a little twist at the end.
It has a twist at the end.
Yeah. We
My
always have to
goodness
have a
gracious!
twist. At least one twist at the end. Yeah.
My goodness gracious. All right. Thank you so much, JJ
You're welcome.
Renek,
Thank you
for being
having
an
me.
Author's Edge. Tune in again next week for more tips and resources and your favorite conversations. Our next guest will be Dr. Clarissa Willis, and we will be chatting about her latest books on early child development. Till then, see you around the inkwell.
Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Guy L. Freer. With Guy L. Freer. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on this that transforms, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael and Bob maintain Gael and Bob maintain Gael and Bob sense of well-being. Gael maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and listeners flourish in the spotlights and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob. Okay, audience, here's Gael.
And I'm back.